Everybody, welcome back to another edition of VC TV. I'm your host, Kyle Ellicott, and we are here to talk about something very fun and exciting, and that is business inclusion. We talk a lot here on VC TV about different technologies and industries around the world, including the regions in which they're based, what you need to know as an investor or as a founder building and investing. But we've also talked a little bit about areas like climate change and sustainability. We've talked about financial inclusion, and now we're coming to full circle and talking about business inclusion, looking at all areas of the different economies that have been created and how to bring business and those into business that may not have otherwise had the opportunity to. But more importantly, where is investment going in these areas, right? When we talk about financial inclusion, we've spoken a lot about fintech and the applications around payment and banking, whether that be neobanks and others that have been introduced. What's happening in business? What's happening in that world to bring us this new economy that's going to be setting forth our decade in front of us? Well, that's what we're here to talk about. And big thank you to you, our audience, for tuning in. Liking what you hear today, make sure you click that big red subscribe button down there to tune in all day, every day to all episodes of VC TV all around the world as we bring the best and the brightest here to you, your screens, to share their thoughts and insights along with their on-the-ground perspective of different technologies, industries, and regions around the world, how they're intersecting, what's happening so that you know the latest, again, whether you're investing or building. And entrepreneurs, this is also the opportunity for you to get up on our virtual stage to pitch us as investors and founders focused on your area to get real-time feedback, also build foundational relationships with each of us and exposure to our live audience. What better way to end the year and start the next than just that? We have the opportunity for you here at VC TV. Reach out to the team and or myself, and we'd love to find the right fit for you. Speaking of that team, a big thank you to the LATOKEN team and to Maria for bringing all of us together and making VC TV possible every single day. With that, I'm your host, Kyle Ellicott. Let's go ahead and jump in. And first and foremost, I'd love to welcome back Jose, the man of many hats, to talk to us a little bit about himself and a little background.
Thank you, Kyle. Very happy to be on your show. This is the topic that I love best from all the topics we have had so far on VC TV. So I'm really looking forward to it. So my name is Jose Graca. I've been a serial entrepreneur now for quite a long time, more or less like 40 years. Eventually, I had an exit in 1994, became a business angel, which I still am today. So it's quite a long time already, 26 years. And I rolled in as a VC, as a government advisor for fintech. And eventually I decided to become a mentor for startups. And today I'm again with different hats on both sides, one at BizMoney as a lead investor. And what drives me today in this world is bringing business inclusion to every individual on the globe. And really looking forward to it, Kyle.
Wonderful. And we're looking forward to it too. And Jose, just kick us off real quick before we get to the rest of introductions. When you talk about business inclusion, I mean, this is a very important topic to use. You mentioned it multiple times here on VC TV. What does that mean to you?
Well, the problem of business inclusion, look at it like this. Every 2 people on every 10 on this globe, more or less 20% of global population has a dream. And that dream is becoming more or less let's say financial independent from one side, but also being able to earn their freedom to decide whatever they want to do in their life. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, that's not how we educate our children. We educate them to get a job, and the whole educational system is also not underlying for building people to become entrepreneurs. So the problem is that 45 million people give it a try every year. And from those 45 million, we see that in the best case scenario, really best case scenario, 75% falls off in the first year immediately. In some countries, this percentage can go up to 98%. And if you look at a 5-year term, it's more or less 0.5% survives a 5-year term. Now, this is a real disaster for the world because a lot of talent will not get an opportunity. And not only that year, in a lot of cases, it is lifetime. They will not able to get in their whole lifetime being able to build up that business that they have dreamed about. So they come to a very harsh conclusion. And the conclusion is that they are newcomers, they don't have the knowledge, they are not serial entrepreneurs, and they don't have the funds to be able to pay for that knowledge that they need to acquire while building up their business at the same time. So this is the issue. Now, once they understand this, then suddenly they go out to try to raise funds from professional investors, and they come to the conclusion that those funds are unfortunately not available. Why? Because 99% of these newcomers, they want to kick off a traditional business, and it's not about innovation. Even if you would be innovation, then you still, when you go to professional investors, they want you already to have your homework done, have traction, minimum traction, and revenues. So that's not the case. So that means that 0.004%, more or less, will eventually get funds from all the demand in the world. This is a no-go. And they are forced, unfortunately, towards something which is called venture debt. And that venture debt is the worst case scenario because banks don't want to invest in them, so they go out for consumer loans. Those consumer loans, which is high percentage, if you don't pay them back, basically you get into bankruptcy. And knowing the statistics and the outcome, a lot of these guys really get into bankruptcy. So this is the problem. So the only way you can solve this, and we are pioneers and leaders in this area, we have been working now for an X amount of years to get this problem solved. And finally, in 2021, we have some exciting news that we finally are going to launch it. That means that the only way you can get them solved is, one, is getting them that knowledge in a very, very fast pace, typically up to 6 months, because we have noticed that the cash they have available normally on average lasts 6 months. And the second thing is that you need to get them to, as fast as possible, to free cash flows. There's no business in this world that can survive, big or small, without free cash flows. Forget it. So if you bring them
so
to
Jose,
flows,
I'm gonna pause you. So sorry, Jose, I'm gonna pause you right there. That's a big definition for everybody. So I want to pause that right there. I want to make sure we get introductions from our two other speakers before we dive further in the topic. But thank you, Kevin. Welcome back to the show. It's an absolute pleasure. A wonderful book that you've put out there in the world all around blockchain. But before I give your intro away, I'm going to turn it over to you. A little intro, a little background.
Kyle, hello, thank you. Good to be back. So, Jose, we've not actually met personally, but you were introduced as the man with many hats. I might not have a hat on, but your background isn't dissimilar to mine. I actually started working for banks as an analyst, so you could suggest that was coming up, analysing bank balance sheets and deciding why not to lend to companies. But I jumped into business development, and for 26 years or so, I've been running a business and finance consultancy firm. But I am also a mentor for the UK's largest entrepreneur accelerator program, and specifically a fintech mentor for that program, which is Europe's largest fintech accelerator. And I'm a mentor and a guest lecturer at Cass Business School. And specifically, again, with regard to this topic today, I'm involved with Prince's Trust. And so that focuses very much on people, young people, that come from, let's say, less, more disadvantaged backgrounds in whatever way. And so it's exactly as you were describing, that those people that have a dream and want to get there, but very much at the end of the spectrum, that don't have the financial resources, don't even have the contacts, the knowledge that maybe some other people do, and so needs that extra bit of hand-holding to make their dreams come true. But whether it's with my my business hat on, or whether it's with any of the mentor hats on, I work with early stage businesses, founders, entrepreneurs, from that conception, that dream idea, through to mid-sized corporates. And I've worked in 45 countries, and it's not just about the UK, but it's a similar story in so many countries, albeit with different legislation and tax. And some countries are easier to set up a business in than others, etc., etc. And if you look at the statistics, there are many groups of people that are more disadvantaged than others. So I guess it's being a white male. I'm very firmly in that category of the privileged few around the world, specifically in the UK and Western Europe, where it's deemed to be much easier to get finance and to build a business. But if you're not privileged from that point of view, I mean, whether you're actually privileged or not, the fact that you might not be a white male means you're less privileged. And that's just ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. When you look at females in the UK, they have a much lower chance of getting funding in the UK. And if you're a black female, getting funding is so much more difficult. And all the other different areas, just getting that business started is so much more difficult. And so we spend quite a lot of time working pro bono, even in my commercial space, as well as all the mentoring and what have you, working with different people, as well as sort of white males, as it were, and much more of my personal client list is ladies and the BAME community, etc. Just because they have such a tough time, and it's just so totally wrong.
Absolutely. And thank you, Kevin, and really appreciate the introduction and sharing some of that insight. And Noble, I want to come to you next, and then we're going to dive further into today's topic, but feel free to continue on what business inclusion means to you as well in your introduction.
Hi, guys. My name is Noble Dracone. I'm the author of the books Winning the Trading Game and Trade Like a Pro. I've been in the investment industry for almost 28 years, and I now run Dracone Capital Partners. We raise capital, particularly in the space, crowdfunding space, where since the laws of 2012 in the US have opened up all kind of borders for people to raise money. We focus on 506C in particular, because it's an unlimited raise with unlimited credit investors. We help a lot of companies. We consult with a lot. Over the years, I've operated, my first exit was in the early 2000s, late 1990s, when I was in SMR and mobile development, going from paging into what we now know as digital cell phones. And present day, I work with maccelerator.la with a focus really on being inclusion, but really focusing on inclusion all across the spectrum. We have a mandate where we have a fund where we are looking to invest in over 300 companies over the next 3 years, from 2021 to 2024, 100 a year, putting in seed capital anywhere from the $50,000 to $100,000 range to anybody who goes to our incubator accelerator, to really help them get a boost up and a leg up going forward. Being American is a huge mandate in a lot of ways, because I don't think you can be flippant about the needs of everybody in the US. There are more poor white males in the United States almost than any other place. And so when I always hear the white male privilege, I get that there's a privilege and systemic racism involved, but there's a real attack on people who are just poor in the United States across the board. And I think that needs to really be addressed. We have a pandemic in the Appalachians right now, where all the manufacturing jobs have left. There have been people who've come in and exploited it, telling people they're going to teach them about tech, and then have left. And so it's easy to make this business inclusion fall down upon racial and lines of sex, but it really is a matter of the haves and the have-nots as well. So while there are these other layerings of racial issues and male versus female and etc., a lot of it really also impacts just people who don't have access and don't have privilege, and who will never have access. We're in a year where I have 5 children, and they range from college age down to preschool, in which kids are going to be left behind in just being able to know the basic R's, right? Reading, writing, and arithmetic for this last year of a pandemic, because we can't even get proper internet service, quote unquote, to kids in rural areas. They still don't even have, we're talking 5G. There's still a dial-up in a lot of different areas, right? And then you have the whole, the laws fighting against full internet inclusion and throttling in some areas in which you're paying more for bandwidth, and even I think Comcast, excuse me if I'm wrong, but Comcast said next year, going into the next year of pandemic, is going to start throttling internet. So I think business inclusion also requires being able to access to all the same resources. And I think that really is the key, both mental, financial, and just basic things such as the internet that have now become almost as necessary as the air we breathe in order for people globally to feel included, as well as people here in the US. So I believe on a lot of spectrums, and I look forward to this conversation today, that we have to really open our mind to what inclusion means in a lot of ways, because it's fallen along these really aggressive divides that involve race. And I don't think race is the sole issue. There are more poor white people in jail than almost anybody else. We can talk based on per capita, but there are more poor white people in jail. And a lot of these people who are in jail now are in jail for less than $1,000 worth of bail, right? So there's these things that are going on that I think that it makes it difficult to then have these high level conversations of saying we want to include everybody in business, and then most people still can't do a balance sheet. So yeah, I look forward to this topic.
Well, let's dive in. I mean, Noble, you're bringing it up. I mean, let's take that one level deeper in terms of what is inclusion and who should be included and what does that mean, as you're bringing up a good point. So why don't you continue on, and then we'll spread it across to everybody. So in terms of inclusion, I mean, who is included in this? How do we define inclusion when we're looking at it from the business perspective? I know we'll get into finance potentially as well, but when we look at business inclusion, let's define it.
Yeah. So business inclusion, I have these conversations on a consistent basis. And one of the things that people say is that, by being a non-white male, if you go into these VC meetings, you don't get as much funding, or you don't even get any funding at all. And if you're Black female, you get even less. These are all true statements. But what's also overlooked is that system is not designed to give anyone money. That in fact, almost 99% of the projects that show up at the VC door over 4,000 or 5,000 still don't get funded. And then the few that do get funded then fall along these lines. So it's a system that's already designed to keep people out. And because of that, there has to be an alternative viewpoint on how you go about raising capital, period, regardless of race and ethnicity. And so I do believe that business inclusion requires a lot more mentorship. And that's why we've been happy at M Accelerator to really be focused on bringing in people of diverse backgrounds, ethnicity, countries, alike, and really pulling them in and educating them on basic business, how to create a simple pitch deck, how to design, do iterative design on marketing and advertising. And so you're absolutely right that more people need to be brought into the door, but it doesn't mean that there's going to be a commensurate immediate amount that there's going to be more raised for those people. I think that the business inclusion concept has to be also giving founders and entrepreneurs a realistic expectation of what going through that unicorn system involves and invokes as you're raising capital. I don't believe in what happens, I think, is a lot of people feel that once they've gotten all the pieces of the puzzle in place, the right pitch deck and the right business plan, and they've gone through the right MVP, that all of a sudden, gobs of cash are going to overflow. And there have been people who've done that long before we started saying that we need to have more people who are African American, more people Hispanic, that still did all those right things and didn't get the capital. So I believe that there's also that whole setup that in the business inclusion, there has to be a setup for a true realistic expectation of what that system invokes, and then what it means to raise capital. We talk to and we help people raise capital regardless of ethnicity and inclusion and the like all the time. And we've seen people with great projects, great ideas, not find funding. And they're probably most likely never going to find funding because they don't fit the unicorn parameter, regardless of what they are, because sometimes the business is the business. And so I believe that the business inclusion that does need to go on is a lot more outreach, a lot more education, and that's been happening, and has been telling people that this area is here. I don't believe that people need to look at this side of the investment world and the institutional side as solely a panacea to the ills of business capital. That there still needs to be a place for borrowing, that there still needs to be a place for understanding what decentralized finance is, and maybe tapping into, blockchain as an opportunity to raise capital for your business. That there's other ways, and that this is just a small aspect, and don't allow that psychologically to stop you from creating a good business and believing in your project. And so I love the outreach. I mean, I love that everyone's, LinkedIn. If anybody's on LinkedIn, there's been a complete 180 in how people speak about race, how people interact, the level of interaction, and how people are being pulled in to work on projects. We've seen more incubators than ever. My only concern is that hopefully they're not exploitive, right? That these, there's an opportunistic component of all of this in which people jump into a space and try and make everything seem all roses when it really wasn't roses to begin with, right? It was, this whole VC institutional side is a horrific hell driver for a lot of entrepreneurs, regardless of ethnicity and race, right? There's founders who are beat up all along the way to the IPO and have lost their hair by the time they're 32, because it's a stressful space to be in, regardless of who you are. And so I think that as long as the inclusion and the idea of inclusion is, okay, we're going to teach you and give you all the basic tools necessary, it's still not going to change some of the internal bias that occurs, right? Being the right pedigree, being the right relationships, coming from the right colleges, having the right network. There's still that 20-year gap, right, of where things were in 2000, and then the first bubble from 1980 to 1980 to 2000, where you just didn't, if you don't know those people, it's going to be very difficult to know them now. It's, you can reach out to them, you have these interactions, but companies and people invest with people who they know. And so having a mentorship program and having relationships, that's the first step. But I think more importantly is giving everyone the basic tools to run a business. Stop giving people the idea that reaching unicorn status is the end, because it really isn't. Because when you raise all that money, you have to do even more.
Well, that's the kicker that most people, on that particular note, right? That's the thing that people forget. The bigger the success, the more responsibility and the more you're held to drive up. And so you don't always need the grand slams. There's plenty of, singles, doubles, and triples, to use the baseball reference, that you can definitely still be happy with. But I think to your point, Noble, is everyone should have access to the various resources which may or may not work for them, right? So having mentors, having networks, having access to different programs, there's so many different things out there. It's just getting access to those and allowing for everyone to do so. Kevin, I see you shaking your head, so I'm going to jump to you, and then Jose, I'll come to you next. Feel free to continue, and anything else you'd like to add, Kevin.
I think you're absolutely right, Noble, in that it is about education. So it's about education at school, but it's about education in business in every possible way. So all a mentor does, all any of those other possibilities does, is actually help to inform those people about what is possible, what's the best way to go about it, etc. But if you speak to any VC, they will always tell you that there's not enough businesses out there that are good enough for them to invest in. Whereas if you speak to any business that's trying to raise finance, they will always say it's impossible getting money out of a VC. And that sort of shows that there is a difference between what the investors are looking for and actually what the business is looking for investment or offering them. And often that's about the underlying business itself, but often it's about the story. It's about how that story is presented. It's about them understanding what's required from a pitch deck or a business plan or an information memorandum if you start to go up the scale. And so often it's because they've not been properly advised, or it's about just not really understanding how to play the game by the right rules. And you also mentioned much earlier on about crowdfunding. So if we look at how you go about a crowdfunding round, it's a very different conversation to how you go about a discussion with a VC, for example. or an ultra high net worth that's looking at investing in a business. So you need to understand what you're trying to do with your business. Do you want it to be a lifestyle business? Are you looking to expand and conquer the world? How you go about it, what the story is, how you tell that story. And in my time, I've come across so many individuals, founders, entrepreneurs with fantastic ideas and businesses. And they've got the idea, they've got the concepts, the innovation, whatever it happens to be, but they just aren't business people. And it's that bit that they need the help with so often. And I would say, well, the majority of people I come across are much smarter than me when it comes to actually the business, what they've invented or the niche in the market they've found. But I've so often had conversations with people that after half an hour, they're saying, wow, I've learned more in that last half an hour than I have in the last 6 months or year or whatever it happens to be. And that then enables them to move on and have the right conversations with the right people. I love also, Noble, that you said you were investing or were involved in the investments of sort of $50,000, $100,000 type sizes, because we all know it's so much easier often to raise 5 million than it is 500,000, and certainly than it is 50,000. So crowdfunding has definitely come in and sort of enabled more inclusion from everybody. It's totally transformed investment at the lower end, but not at the low end, I would suggest. Still trying to raise 10,000, 50,000 is nigh on impossible unless you know somebody. And again, coming back to this whole inclusion piece, if you know somebody because you're privileged in whatever way that means, then it's much easier because you come from a more wealthy background or you've gone to the right school or whatever it happens to be. You've just got a better network. LinkedIn and those sort of places have helped that massively by being able to sort of transform that situation and bridge that gap and get into other people that you wouldn't know, but you've still got to have the right story and approach them in the right way. And it's about building the right team around you and going about it in the right way.
And that's just more of just smaller and smaller pieces that play a piece in this bigger picture, to your point, Kevin. And Jose, anything else to add? Thank you, Kevin and Noble, to your points. I mean, Jose, I'm going to turn it over to you. I'm just going to let you go. So go ahead.
Yeah. So I think I subscribe to what Noble said and also what Kevin said. They're really right, but there is much more to it. What I mean is that, let me put it like this. There is no way that with an incubation program or with an accelerator that you can solve the issue of the need of the millions of people that are out there that need a solution. That's the problem. So the mentorship is fantastic, but the problem is it takes some time. It's not done in one day. And besides that, it takes some time. You cannot, accept millions of people in one shot. So that's one problem. The other problem is like this. If you are able to generate those free cash flows where I stopped, then suddenly you don't need to go out to raise funds. That's the issue, because you can take that money, you earned it, and you can reinvest it in your business and you can scale it. Once that business is scaled up to a certain level and you feel that you want to go faster, then suddenly you are fundable because you have revenue generation. So you can go to a professional investor, and if he likes it, he can fund you, or you can just go out to a traditional bank and get a loan, and suddenly you have cash to pay it back, because the last thing you want is getting a loan, not being able to pay back. So what we have figured out, and McKinsey told it last year quite well, is that 75% more or less of the time of every founder goes into bureaucratic activities. It's not about building their business or getting anything done. And business building, in essence, is about execution. The idea is fine. The execution is what makes it happen. So if you're not going to get into that execution, which takes an X amount of time, and you don't have the cash available to finance that learning curve, you are done. That's it. So let's come to the outcome. The outcome is that you need to get enrolled into what I call and I've been telling this many times, a digital environment, which I call a social market economy, which gives you everything you need free of charge, that you can take that and not spend your 75% of your time into bureaucratic execution. What you need to become is, in a very fast pace, thinking like a Fortune 500 CEO. And that's what we do. We give you the whole machine. Suddenly, you free 75% of your time. You get very fast to that free cash flows, and you start learning to think, making decisions like a Fortune 500 CEO. And those computers, look at it at your workforce that executes everything that you need to get the job done. Now, this doesn't end here. This is just the beginning of the process. Because whatever you do, even with this all at your fingertips available, doesn't mean you don't need to go and learn more. Doesn't mean that you don't need to have soft skills. Yes, you need that, and you need to develop those soft skills. And developing soft skills is not something we can give you. It's something that you need to develop along that process. But what I can tell you is that that percentage that we are talking about today, which, by the way, touches also mid-class families. Don't underestimate that. Mid-class families, low-class families, they all suffer with it. It's not about race or color. It's about you being able to finance that learning curve. And if you come from a family that has business tradition, I can tell you that the success rate comes much, much higher, which is not the case for 99% of population.
So this is a great point. I mean, everyone's shaking their heads. I want to switch gears around this and some specific industries for each of you. So fintech, blockchain, AR, VR, gaming. I want to kind of switch the plate here. So talk to us a little bit about where investment is going, but maybe also a little bit about where investment is going in your respective industries. So for you, Jose, let's kick it off about where you're seeing investments going around finance or fintech that can play a role in business inclusion as well.
So looking at our case in particular, right? Building up this ecosystem touches fintech, because you need to have an amount of ingredients, which is like, put it like this. If you become a business owner, what do you need to know? Marketing, taxation, legal, business process automation, right? The whole setup, including finance. There is no way in this world that anybody knows everything. And if you do, then it took you probably 40 years. That's the issue. So if we talk about fintech, okay, then that's a piece of the pie that you need to learn, but it's definitely not the solution. Fintech helps you with the settlements and everything else, but how are you going to solve suddenly your accounts receivable or your accounts payable or the contracts that you are closing, or even if it's, you know, over the counter payments, how are you going to solve those settlements? So fintech is basically a part of the role, but it's one of the most important pieces of the puzzle, although it's not the biggest one. Because without fintech, or without the cash or the money as we call it, there is no way you can do fast settlements. And that's the issue. So look at it like the engine that makes everything smoother, right? For you to be able to do all the rest that you do around it. The investment area that we are looking for is artificial intelligence, deep learning, neural networks, okay? Because that's what makes everything happen and going fluid, right? I'm not talking about quantum computing, because as I told in the previous program, quantum computing is far away from getting concluded. And one of the biggest problems for quantum computing today is that they don't have material support to build up that quantum computing. So every quantum computer that is built up today, right? The material support, let's call it the hardware, is not the adequate material. So we are long and far away from that. But artificial intelligence, machine learning, neural networks, and embedded into cloud computing, that's big business, whatever you do.
That's a good point. And one other thing I want to throw in real quick, it just actually popped in my head. Thank you, Jose. Noble, actually all three of you had touched on this right around resources. One of the trends that I'm starting to see on my side from my network of investors, including the three of you and others here on VCTV, is actually the sharing of resources and trying to make it easier to access certain resources that were once gated, right? If you wanted an introduction, Jose, to Noble, you'd have to go through Kevin, Maria, or myself. Now, instead, what people are doing is creating matching tools. These are all free tools online, whether that's NFX, who's a venture firm creating Signal, which is, I would say, one earlier version. We now have Newstack, a firm out of Chicago, creating a website called VC, so venturecapital-rank.com, listing venture capital firms and helping to match what you're looking to build with who's investing. We've got a handful of other VCs, and I apologize for forgetting their names at the moment, that are putting these resources out to match not just founders and investors, one thing we've mentioned, but founders and founders, or founders and team members. And part of that value chain around business inclusion, I just want to take a quick stab here, having run an accelerator and done a lot of this myself as well, is connecting people, right? So investment is just one piece of it. Finding a co-founder is another, but then also finding people that believe in your vision and have the resources and the time and the knowledge to help build that. That's actually incredibly difficult. And now in a more distributed world, you'd think it's easier. It's still very difficult. I mean, Noble's shaking his head. I mean, while LinkedIn has changed, it's still very difficult to find those. And again, the point is we're starting to see more resources put out there into the world. So I just wanted to add on that because I just got pinged from a viewer that I forgot to mention that. So there we go. A shout out to the Newstack team as well. But Kevin, same question to you. I mean, where are you seeing business inclusion focused around blockchain and the distributed ledger world that you focus on so heavily, but also where are you seeing investment go around business inclusion and some of the topics we've talked about?
Well, I would say in general, finance is looking more at all things digital. And specifically, I agree, AI is one of those areas that is all around us, even if people don't necessarily, are not necessarily aware of that. But I would say digital, sustainability, those sort of areas are ones that people are interested in. So everything, I'm coming across so many businesses that are looking at sustainable fashion or sustainable this or sustainable that. And that's something that investors are interested in because buyers are interested in buying products. The whole world is moving much more eco-friendly and sort of green in every possible way. And around blockchain again is one of those technologies, I would say hand in hand with AI that is all around us that people don't necessarily know that it is. Again, it's not a panacea. It doesn't solve everything. There's a lot of cases to begin with where people said, "Hey, I've got this great new toy. What can I do with it? How can I use it?" And it doesn't fit all topics. It should be the other way around. It should be a case of, I've got a problem. How can I solve it? Does blockchain help? Rather than, as I say, starting at the wrong end. But blockchain, very definitely in business, you can see it being used and transforming the space in all things supply chain. I've seen it being used in everything from mining through to tracing the good, through to tracing it being manufactured, to ending up in the product, to being recycled. Or you can be using it very much in terms of that whole payment as well. So by using smart contracts, in that you can use it in the trade finance element of moving the products around and such things. And it sort of comes back to being able to prove the provenance of something. And a lot of that comes back to that whole sustainable piece. So people wanting to know where something has come from, and more with people beginning to ditch fast fashion and things like that. You know, where was this $1 t-shirt made and what type of factory was it made in, and that sort of stuff is now beginning to drive people's buying emotions and where they're buying from and what. And so the stores are having to be able to show that. And so when you start to combine sort of AI and blockchain and these other new technologies, my experience has been it is very much early stage businesses that are driving this. In whatever sector, it's the it's the bigger companies that are so much slower. It's the proverbial super tanker analogy. By the time they thought of changing something and they've managed to have board meeting after board meeting and it's taken years to change course, it's the young entrepreneurs that are coming in there and seeing the opportunities and doing something. And I've had lots of conversations with bigger business and smaller business. And they're saying, well, basically, you build that and then we'll make you an offer for it in 2 years, 3 years time, because we'd still be talking about it by the time you've developed it and taken it forward.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing how that happens as well. And appreciate the insights, Kevin. Noble, I want to come to you last on this. Same question as Jose and Kevin, but this time from the gaming and the AR VR angle. Where are you seeing business inclusion and where are you seeing opportunities for investment in these areas playing a role?
There's a couple of conferences that I've attended this past year, right before the pandemic set off. They were all about the Black mobile app developers, and that's a huge group that's just coming up and developing, and there's some great apps and great programs in that space. Same thing. So it goes back to the education. I guess it still is the push. Most people don't know how to break into the world of gaming and what to learn. And so one of the good things is that you've got universities like UC Irvine, which has a whole entire gaming department out here in Southern California, and what they're trying to bring more people into both esports as well as in game development. And I also think the whole movement towards non-programming programming has been a big boon for people like Game Salad, which is a great opportunity. I believe it was Kevin saying there's a lot of people who are familiar with all the processes and have brilliant capability, but they just don't have maybe all the business acumen necessary for what they're doing. And so that's a big boost in the idea that people can put together and create their games. But all this still is mitigated by the fact that people still need to have access to the internet to do it. Right. We live in where this pandemic has made the most glaring example of how do you get internet to everyone, even in urban areas. There's so many urban children falling behind in school because just in Los Angeles, the bandwidth is not even. Right. So this is I think the net neutrality laws something has to happen where, particularly, this is the biggest glaring hole we've seen, that the internet has to be considered a utility that is both reliable and consistent, just as we rely on both our electricity and our water, if we expect for everyone to develop any level of equal footing. It's great that mobile telecommunication is doing 5G and is spreading out a 5G network, but then that requires that people go out and acquire hub spots. So, it's great that people are starting getting entrees into these worlds and finding the ability to be artists and developers and learn how to rig. And Art Institute was doing great for a while, bringing in all these kids, but then they got slammed. So there's like these moments where you have these glimpses, particularly in the gaming industry, where they're starting to pull people in, but then all of a sudden, rules, regulations, or with the pandemic, sets everyone back a little bit to even get involved in these spaces. So I think of all the spaces, gaming may be the most difficult for business inclusion for both women and minorities, because it does require even more relationships to be a part of it, to even get in and to be an intern. And then the skill sets require oftentimes that you have already had a base in being able to design, develop, and allowed to be storytelling before you ever showed up. And so the gaming industry has a long way to go towards full business inclusion, even though it's a multi-billion-dollar industry and growing fast. Is leaving out a large swath of people across the globe and concentrating all the wealth in the hands of a few. And this is going to be another issue leading in, particularly if we figure out what happens with Facebook, or what mandates come out from that. So I think that overall, just to comment on something Jose said, I signed up for BizMoney, by the way, to kind of see it, because I'm skeptical. I've run businesses for 20 something years. And I think that is oftentimes not just the 75% of the energy being spent on the technical work of the taxes and everything. It's actually that 20% Pareto's principle that most people fail at, that do 80% of success. Most people just have bad ideas. And so I'm happy that most people are are washed out of the system. There may be millions and millions of people that want to have businesses, but realistically, millions and millions of people don't deserve businesses. I think that literally in the business world, it is survival of the fittest, because the customer decides if they want you. You can't decide if you have a good idea. I've had multiple businesses in which 70% of them have failed because I didn't understand the problem solution set, even though I got all my documents right. So I look forward to seeing how this plays out. And I'm excited about Jose's mandate in a big way. I think that's going to be helpful, but I like to see how it plays out in execution. But overall, I think that we just need to kind of pressing forward. You know, the world is growing no matter what we do. It's going to evolve and change. And I'm glad to be part of whatever this transformation kind of looks like. And I think the easiest entree will be the merging of blockchain and gaming. But again, I don't know how you include people, because 90% of the people, no matter race, still don't even understand how to manhandle a public or private key. So, we're all still trying to figure it out.
Which is also an opportunity. I mean, I'll throw that in there. That's a huge opportunity for someone out there that's looking to build or invest in the space to make that layer of application, that bridge between the complex and the ease of access, right? That interface was the word I was looking for. That is what's needed to help bridge those two worlds, because we all know how to play games and we all enjoy making money. So put the two together and make it easy, you've got a very exciting economy. And we've talked a little bit about the potential of what the virtual economy, a little bit of what Noble and Kevin and Jose have all touched on, will become in the next few years. We're looking at $100+ billion economy as of now statistics. Imagine what's going to happen next year as this technology digitization really increases as expected. That could go up to $500 million. That could go up to $1 trillion. That could become our new economy going forward, that everything we do now is more digital than physical. Just a prediction as we close out the year here in 2020 to 2021. I may not be right, so I'm totally okay with that, but everyone should have a little fun and also should think about that opportunity that Noble, Kevin, and Jose are all throwing out in aggregate. With that being said, gentlemen, I do want to come around for closing thoughts and where everyone can be found. Noble, I feel like you gave a great closing thought right there, but anything else you want to add, and where can everyone find you online?
Easy to find me, Noble Dracone on LinkedIn. Both investors, we're looking forward to working with you guys and showing you kind of the pathway we're in, as well as founders who are looking for capital. You can reach out to me on Twitter at Dracone, which is DRAKOLN on the screen. And love having new conversations, meeting new people. I've met more friends and new acquaintances during the pandemic than I probably have in the last 5 years.
Love it. Thank you, Noble. Kevin, to you, closing thoughts. Where can you be found online to continue the conversation?
Yeah, so the closing thoughts I'll come back to. So I can be found on LinkedIn at Kevin R. Smith, MSc, just to try and distinguish me from a few other Smiths out there. And Boom and Partners, as behind me, is the business. But my closing thoughts are, 2020 has been a horrible year for pretty much everybody in one form or another. And there are, though, benefits, and the benefits from it are we all learn more from mistakes or things that go wrong than we do from good things. You tend to analyze things in more depth. If things go well, you just tend to accept it or think, hey, didn't I do well there, rather than actually looking at it. Whereas when things have gone wrong or you're having tough times, you have to analyze it. What can we do differently? What do we need to do? How can we get better cash flow, whatever it happens to be? And I think 2020 has been a very, very big learning year for so many businesses. How can they adapt? How can they pivot? And it very much is always the survival of the fittest. And it's also accelerated everything that was going on anyway. So it's accelerated that whole digitization. It's accelerated the process of non-cash payments, and it's accelerated all of those other things that were just happening anyway. And the world isn't going to be the same again. There was a big survey done recently that was looking at whether people want to work in an office or not. And on balance, it was basically everybody wanted to work 2 to 4 days in an office. Nobody particularly wants to work at home the whole time, because we're social animals and we want to meet and we want that interaction, and it's recognized that you get a lot of extra benefits from working together. But likewise, it's proven that you don't have to work in an office 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, to be seen to be working and to be productive. And so people are looking for something different. And so I think the whole world is going to change, and it's going to drive a lot of those changes, as I say, digitization and everything else. So it really is a good time of year always to look back on the year and see what you've learned. But this year in particular, there are a lot of lessons out there. And in any bad situation, some have suffered and have gone down, but there are massive new opportunities out there. Because it's a different world, there's lots of gaps opened up where those new possibilities are. And it is very much the entrepreneurial startup end of the sector that is going to be seeing those and making them happen. So they're my rather long closing thoughts.
Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate that. Jose, to you, quick closing thoughts, and then where can you be found online as well?
So the closing thoughts for me goes not only for those who basically are the newcomers, but it also goes for the 430 million permanent unemployed that we have on the globe, and that will start growing probably up to 1 billion in the next 5 to 10 years at least, due to automation and robotization and all things that are going on. And these people need to have a solution for their future lives. And the only way they will be able to get it is to understand that they need to get into a machine that does all the work for them, instead of they spending time doing all that. And it's fine that we go for the toughest, because it will always be like this. But we also need to look at it from a social perspective. And the social perspective is, if you have a son or a daughter and they learn how to walk, right? You always, as a father, have a helping hand to pick them up and to help them on that roadmap. And that's how you need to look at BizMoney. We pick people up and we help them on that roadmap. We don't tell them, it's done, there's no more chance for you. So you can find me on LinkedIn under Jose Graca, or under BizMoney. Just search me up. I'm an open networker, so I'm always available to talk to you, and please reach out. Or you can go to VCTV, click on that button, and you can find me here as well.
Wonderful, thank you. And Kevin, I want to come back to you real quick, as it is end of the year. Jose plugged us right there. It's VCTV. We're asking all of our wonderful guests why you joined VCTV, to share your thoughts and insights, and we'd just love to hear any feedback you have for us, and why you choose to jump on multiple episodes, as soon viewers will find out in just a few minutes.
Well, I guess it's you've got a very wide global audience, and I think you cover lots of topics. So you keep going back to the most important topics, but nevertheless, there's always a flow of new topics. And so I think it's an ideal opportunity to catch many viewers, and you have a good selection of different speakers.
Perfect.
I guess that's it.
Well, thank you very much, Kevin. I appreciate it. And to your audience, thank you so much for tuning in. If you like what you heard, click subscribe, give us a thumbs up as well. Do reach out if you'd like to be on a show, joining Kevin, Jose, Noble, and other speakers as well. Thank you, Jose and Noble. We'd love to have you here on the show to share your thoughts and insights around different technologies, industries, and regions around the world. That goes for you too, entrepreneurs. Join us up on the virtual stage to pitch us your company, product, or service. What better way to end the year and start the next than doing just that and getting exposure to our entire live audience and community as well. And a big thank you to our team at LATOKEN and to Maria for making VCTV possible and bringing us all together all day, every day, to share our thoughts and insights with you, so you know where to invest and where to build all day, every day. And with that, I'm your host, Kyle Ellicott. You can find me along with all of our speakers online 24/7, 365. Make sure you add context when you reach out, and we'll be back here in